Welcome to another explainer, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. Look, over the course of 2025 and early 2026, the global headlines have been just dominated, completely taken over by these escalating geopolitical tensions between the US, Israel, and Iran. But while the military analysts are doing their thing, an entirely different, massive conversation has been blowing up online. Suddenly, you've got commentators, theologians, and internet sleuths rushing right back to their ancient biblical texts. They are literally pointing to scriptures that are thousands of years old and connecting them directly to the warfare flashing across our screens. So today, we're going to objectively unpack this. We're looking straight at the ancient texts people are suddenly tying to these wild modern events.
It's a completely viral question, and I guarantee you've seen it everywhere right now. Is the Iran conflict actually prophesied in the Bible? Think about it. Are the military strikes and the huge regional realignments we're seeing today part of some ancient divine script? Or are we simply just watching the tragic, cyclical nature of human geopolitics unfold again? In today's explainer, we are taking a strictly neutral, purely analytical look at exactly what these ancient texts say, how modern experts are interpreting them, and why this debate has become so incredibly intense. Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. 1. The modern conflict. 2. Jeremiah and Elam's bow. 3. Ezekiel's end times coalition. 4. The Prince of Persia. And 5. Debating prophetic fulfillment. Let's get into it.
Section 1. The modern conflict.
So, to understand the ancient stuff, we gotta start with the modern timeline. Many analysts trace this current escalation way back to 1979. That's when the Islamic Revolution fundamentally changed Iran and triggered a massive Persian diaspora. Fast forward to the really intense proxy wars and escalating conflicts we saw in June 2025, which all kind of boiled over into the direct US and Israeli strikes on Iran on February 27, 2026. It was literally the second those late February strikes hit the news that scholars and online commentators just rushed back to their Bibles, claiming they were seeing ancient history mapping perfectly onto current events.
Now, what's really interesting about this is, if you read the Bible, you're not going to find the word Iran. It's just not there. Instead, you'll find Elam and Persia. So to make any sense of the commentary, we need this translation key. Ancient Elam was a kingdom located right in what is today southwestern Iran, specifically the modern Khuzestan province. Ancient Persia, which eventually grew to absorb Elam, corresponds to the broader modern-day nation of Iran. This exact geographic link, that's the entire foundation for all the prophetic interpretations we are about to explore.
Section 2. Jeremiah and Elam's bow. Right, before we actually look at the text itself, we really have to understand how modern scholars are reading it. They use this theological framework called dual fulfillment. Basically, it's the idea that a prophetic warning might have happened partially in ancient times, like an ancient kingdom falling, but it's actually pointing toward a far-term ultimate fulfillment in the latter days, or the end times, kind of like an echo that gets louder over time. This framework is absolutely crucial. It's exactly how commentators are taking texts from thousands of years ago and superimposing them onto the geopolitical warfare we're watching on the news today. All right, let's look at the actual text that went totally viral after the February 2026 strikes. It's from Jeremiah 49:35, and it says, "I will break the bow of Elam, the mainstay of their might." Now, keep in mind, ancient Elam sits exactly where Iran's most strategic modern energy and nuclear infrastructure is today, including things like the Bushehr plant. Historically speaking, the bow represented Elam's famously elite archers. But modern commentators, they interpret this bow as a vivid metaphor for Iran's contemporary military strength. So when missile launchers and strategic defense sites were being dismantled in recent conflicts, you had prophecy experts pointing directly to this single verse as a modern-day breaking of Elam's bow. The prophecy in Jeremiah doesn't stop there, though. It continues, stating that the people of Elam will be scattered to the four winds. Commentators closely link this to the brutal 1979 Islamic Revolution, which, as we mentioned, triggered a massive modern Iranian diaspora. To put that into perspective, over 1 million Persians fled their homeland, basically scattering across the globe. But you know what keeps scholars so intensely focused on this specific passage? It's the conclusion. Jeremiah ends with a divine promise that eventually Elam will be restored and its fortunes returned.
Section 3. Ezekiel's End Times Coalition.
Moving on to the prophet Ezekiel. Chapters 38 and 39 describe what is famously known as the Gog and Magog War. This prophecy outlines this massive future coalition of nations that teams up to attack a secure Israel. And in the text, God supernaturally intervenes to defeat these invading armies. So why are we talking about this today? Well, many theologians and geopolitical analysts are pointing to the current, absolutely unprecedented alignment between Iran and its regional proxies, and they're arguing, hey, we might literally be watching the formation of this exact biblical coalition right now. The main reason Ezekiel is getting so much attention today is because of verse 5. It says, Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Persia is explicitly listed in this invading alliance. While so many ancient nations in the Bible have completely disappeared from the map or changed their identities over the centuries, Persia, modern-day Iran, is one of the very few nations in this ancient text that is still recognized by essentially the exact same geographic and cultural identity today. For prophecy watchers, that is a massive flashing red light.
Section 4. The Prince of Persia.
So, the absolutely crucial point to understand here is this. A huge number of scholars and believers view the physical wars unfolding in the Middle East as just a shadow of a much larger, ongoing, invisible spiritual war. Like this quote from Ephesians illustrates, this whole theological perspective asserts that humanity is not just fighting flesh and blood, politicians and armies, but is actually caught right in the crossfire of unseen spiritual principalities. Basically, this perspective splits the conflict into two completely different realms. On one hand, in the physical realm, we see earthly kings, military strikes, and arguments over borders. Standard news stuff. But the biblical text argues for this parallel spiritual realm right alongside it. We're talking high-ranking spiritual forces, angelic armies, and demonic princes holding influence over specific earthly geographic territories. And believe it or not, one of the most famous of these spiritual entities is tied directly to Iran. Check this out. In Daniel chapter 10, the prophet was praying for a vision. The text says an angel was dispatched on day 1 to bring him the answer. But the angel didn't actually arrive for 21 days. Why the delay? Well, the text claims a demonic entity holding authority over that specific region, literally called the Prince of Persia, intercepted the angel and held him hostage for 3 weeks until the archangel Michael finally showed up to intervene. Today, many modern theologians will tell you that they believe this exact same ancient spiritual entity is what's actively driving the hatred and the intense warfare we're seeing in that region right now.
Section 5. Debating prophetic fulfillment.
Now, we absolutely have to look at the other side of the coin here, because the skeptics and critics are pushing back hard. Across Reddit threads and theological blogs, you'll find strong warnings against what they call headline fulfillment. Critics argue that taking modern daily news and trying to force-fit it into ancient scriptures is just bad biblical interpretation, period. They warn that treating texts like Jeremiah 49 as if it's a running commentary for the nightly news is dangerous, and it's often driven by human ego, political agendas, or, let's be real, just a desire to get internet clicks. They are urging everyone to exercise extreme caution before jumping to any premature conclusions. To really capture the skeptic's bottom line, look at this quote I pulled from a recent online forum. It says, "There is no prophecy here, just human ego and greed." And this brilliantly illustrates the secular analytical viewpoint. From this angle, the current crisis is purely a man-made geopolitical struggle. It's about resources, it's about land, it's about power. It is entirely driven by human ego, failed diplomacy, and greed, not some pre-written divine script falling out of the sky.
But, even among believers, there's a really strong call for balance and patience here. A lot of scholars are constantly reminding their audiences that historical events have a habit of repeating in predictable cycles. Instead of panicking over the headlines, they argue that prophecy demands careful, patient study. Plus, they heavily emphasize that the ultimate biblical themes for places like Elam aren't just about warfare and destruction. The bigger picture is actually about eventual spiritual restoration, healing, and peace for the people of that region. So as we wrap up our analysis for today, it really all boils down to these two core perspectives. There are essentially two ways you can view the current events unfolding in the Middle East. You can view them as the literal activation of an eschatological timeline, an ancient script finally playing out in real time, or you can view this as a cyclical geopolitical conflict, where history is simply mirroring the same ancient regional tensions that have existed there for millennia. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought to ponder today. Are we truly witnessing the culmination of ancient biblical prophecy right before our very eyes? Or is human history simply repeating itself, just wearing modern armor? We've laid out the source texts, we've mapped out the geography, and we've covered the fierce debates from both sides. Now, it's totally up to you to consider what you've learned here, go look at these sources for yourself, and dig deeper. If you found this explainer valuable, please hit that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, I'd love to know where you stand, and share this with someone who needs to see it. Plus, if you want to sign up for more incredible content like this, head over to sermonacademy.com right now, and you can even support our mission directly at sermonacademy.com/donate. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, guys, and as always, keep asking the big questions. See you next time.